Good to go.
Yeah, Sophie is appearing to me as freeze. I don't know what happened.
Yes, it is possible that there was an issue with the internet connection, but Greg, all is good on your part, no? Okay.
All is good on my part.
Hi, Sophie, we started.
So hello, everyone. I'm sorry, I just got disconnected, but I'm with you now. Thank you all very much for joining us today for this second webinar of our new Methane Roadmap Action Program webinar series. Jaria, I don't know if you're able to share your screen, but otherwise it's okay. I can get started anyway. So as many of you will now know, the Methane Roadmap Action Program was launched in response of the Global Methane Pledge in 2022. The Global Methane Pledge, which now has 157 country participants, plus the European Commission, who together, under this pledge, committed to collectively reduce methane by 30% by 2030 compared to 2020 levels. So under the Global Methane Pledge, countries are very much encouraged to develop their methane roadmap or action plan. So the Methane Roadmap Action Program that we developed in response to the GMP has the primary objective of supporting the development and the implementation of transparent and consistent national methane roadmap or action plan. Over the past 2 years under this program, we have engaged with over 75 governments on methane roadmap development and action plan through workshops, through technical assistance. And you can all note, and most of you know it now, but all Global Methane Pledge ODA eligible countries can receive CCAC support to develop their methane roadmap or action plan. And if you can move to the next slide, Jaria, that's great. So this year, most of you are now working on the development of your new NDC and of your first biennial transparency report. The fact is that all of the elements that are involved in the development of a methane roadmap or action plan can also be used to include or to enhance inclusion of methane in NDC developments. Hence, under the Methane Roadmap Action Program, we have designed this new webinar series, which is very much dedicated to support countries with concrete and practical guidance for how to leverage all of our MRAP methodology, tools, and resources to support the inclusion or the enhanced inclusion of methane into your NDCs and your BTR. So we are also in parallel in the process of finalizing some NDC and BTR guidance, and we will of course inform all of you once they are ready. And you can move to the next slide, Jaria. And so with regard to NDC, the statute to date is that many countries have included methane into their NDC in some form, but there is a lot of space for increased ambition and increase of specificity in terms of measures and of targets. Improving the inclusion of NDCs, of methane into your NDCs is of major importance. It will first support, it's a unique opportunity to confirm that we are on track to deliver on GMP. It will support the tracking of progress under the GMP. It will also be critical for transparency. Stepping up ambition and transparency will be essential to unlocking finance for methane mitigation. It will also, and Greg will speak more to that in a minute, my colleague Gregory, it will also be an opportunity to bring into the NDC an integrated approach to climate and clean air, which has multiple advantages. And most importantly, the 2025-2035 timeline, which will be covered by the next round of NDC, represents really one of the last opportunities to leverage the near-term climate mitigation benefits that methane abatement can bring while we are transitioning toward net zero economy. So time for more ambitious, more transparent, and more consistent inclusion of methane abatement measure and targets into NDCs is really now. The momentum is here. Out of COP28, one of the decision calls on countries to accelerate reduction of non-CO2 emissions, especially methane. No later than 2 weeks ago, the G7 Climate, Energy and Environment Ministers meeting committed to a 75% reduction in global methane emissions from fossil fuels by 2030. They also committed to accelerate methane measures in line with the global reduction level of at least 35% by 2035, as reflected in the IPCC 1.5 degree scenarios. And they also committed to increase support to developing countries on methane abatement. You can move to the next slide, Jaria. So before we get started, just to say that at the CCAC, we really stand ready to support your effort through the comprehensive system of assistance we have and the Secretariat services we provide to the Global Methane Pledge. And my colleague Nathan Borgford-Parnell, who is co-hosting this program with me, will come back to that at the end of this webinar. So you can move to the next slide. Thank you, Jaria. So today's webinar is very much focused on the agriculture sector and how we can improve methane inclusion in NDC under this sector. So I'm going in a minute to turn to my colleague Gregory Kohler, who is the lead of our CCAC Agriculture Hub. And he's going to tell you more about NDC enhancement guidelines for the agricultural sector. Then we have the pleasure to have with us today Adriano Santiago de Oliveira, who is the General Coordinator of Climate Change and Conservationist Agriculture in the government of Brazil, who will tell you about Brazil's experience. And then we also have the great pleasure of having with us Dr. Trandai Mia, who is Director of the Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Economic Studies at the Institute of Policy and Strategy for Agriculture and Rural Development, who will tell us about Vietnam's experience. This webinar is also, or webinars are also very much intended to be as participatory as possible. So we have allowed for 20 minutes for a Q&A session. You are for now all muted, but during the presentation, you can already engage by asking questions in the chat. And when we will get to the Q&A session, we will make sure you are all able to unmute yourself to be able to ask questions to our presenters. And then my colleague, Nathan Borgford-Parnell, will be closing the session. So with this, I thank you all again very much for being with us today. And I would like to turn to my colleague, Gregory Kohler, for a little bit more context on NDC enhancement for the agricultural sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sophie. We're gonna quickly, transition slides. Are the slides showing up for everyone?
Yes.
Okay. So, hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here with all of you and to talk about how we can maximize ambition under the 2025 NDC revisions and maximizing benefits and prosperity through methane inclusion, especially agricultural methane inclusion. So what is the goal of the work that we're doing with the 2025 NDC revision? We're still staying in line with the 1.5 degrees Celsius ambition of the Paris Agreement. And you can see here the various different iterations of work that's happened at the climate negotiations, from the Paris Agreement to the indicative NDCs, the Katowice climate package, the 2020 NDCs, the IPCC AR6, the first global stocktake at COP28, and now the 2025 NDC revision. These revisions represent the last opportunity for countries to enhance progressive, ambitious greenhouse gas mitigation targets in their nationally determined contributions to maintain our global warming below 1.5 degrees. They also provide an opportunity to set the next stage and generation of national climate plans and commitments for national prosperity and transformation. The specific requirements due by 2025 at COP30 are progressively more ambitious than the previous commitment, taking into account common but differentiated responsibilities. They include all greenhouse gases and economic sectors, including, as we're talking about today, agriculture. They are aligned with 1.5 degrees of the Paris Agreement, and they include information which supports clarity, transparency, and understanding. And why are we combining methane along with long-lived climate pollutants like CO2? By taking action today on short-lived climate pollutants, we can stop near-term warming and help achieve 1.5 degrees total warming. Methane abatement also has a lot of co-benefits for improving air quality. And by taking action today in your NDCs, you can also unlock finance and send clear signals to the finance community what types of action they can invest in. Taking action on methane also helps reduce risks such as sea level rise, extreme weather, and biodiversity loss, especially in the agriculture sector, where there are a lot of co-benefits between biodiversity and methane abatement. By taking...
Hi, Greg. I think everyone is having trouble with the slides because they are not moving.
Oh, okay.
I was wondering if you can check on that.
Let me see if I can. Okay, should be working now.
It's working perfect. Thank you, Greg.
So by taking action on methane, you can see here we're on the bottom left, reduce long-term costs associated with climate change and air pollution. We can prevent premature deaths, improving respiratory illnesses, and boost public health. We can achieve food security and gain economic development options. And we can broader development goals and accelerate action for international climate commitments. So in terms of our progress to date, while many countries have included methane in their overall targets, over 90%, many countries still need to include separate methane targets or assessment of mitigation potential in their NDCs. There's a lot of opportunity here. And you can see also in terms of inclusion of methane measures by sector, only about 35% of countries include agriculture-specific methane measures in their NDCs. But as we'll talk about in a second, there are a lot of opportunities to include agriculture in your methane mitigation measures in the NDCs. So where to start with this process? The number one consideration is the national context, especially in the agriculture sector, where a lot of the mitigation potential is determined by the agroecological zones where you have your agricultural production. So understanding in close consultation with the various stakeholders, both in the agriculture sector, in the various ministries, such as your Ministry of Agriculture, and with the farmers, of course, themselves, understanding what is that national context of agriculture production. With the biannual transparency reports, we also have an opportunity to include that into the NDC revision by looking at what the inventories are today. What are the emission sources and their profile? Once you have an idea of those inventories, you can go into you can analyze those and see what are the actual reduction options and what commitments are available. Once you have an idea of the commitments, you can go into the targets, objectives of strategies, plans, and policies. What should be, for example, the target within the agriculture sector, or if you're going into subsectors in the rice or livestock sector, and how can that be included into subsectoral plans, such as livestock master plans or rice strategies. And then building block 4, looking at the policies and measures, and here actually putting those targets into the policy and finding clear implementation pathways that allow us to reach those targets. So for example, if your target is to reduce the methane intensity of livestock production by 20%, then in building block 4, you would look at the policies and measures such as better feeding of cattle, improved genetics, improved health outcomes that can reach those targets, and how that will be implemented on the farm. Finally, we have, again, the biannual transparency reports and the monitoring, reporting, and verification needed for those reports. In the NDCs, we should set ambitious economy-wide targets that cover all greenhouse gases, CO2, methane, nitrous oxide, HFCs, PFCs, and SF6. The NDCs should specify a base year, a target year, and quantified reduction targets. They should cover all sectors: agriculture, forestry, and land use, waste, cooling, fossil fuels, and industrial emissions. And we have here an example of Japan. Japan aims to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 46%, equivalent to reducing emissions to 760 million tons CO2 in fiscal year 2030 from its fiscal year 2013 levels. So you can see here the base year 2013, the target year 2030, and a quantified emission reduction target of 760 million tons CO2 equivalent. Cutting its emission by 50% from its fiscal year 2013 levels, and this was in Japan's first NDC submitted in 2021. So how does methane fit into the Katowice guidance? First, looking at quantifiable information, looking at a reference year starting point, a base year, reference indicators, and the sources of data. And the quality of the data is always key towards all of this work. Then an implementation timeframe, the implementation period, whether you're looking at single or multi-year period, and your targets within that period. The scope and coverage, your description of the target, the sectors that are included, the gases included, and the co-benefits. So if we're looking at the agriculture sector, you would have CO2, methane, nitrous oxide, and you could look at co-benefits such as how improving livestock productivity reduces the methane intensity of production, and helps achieve co-benefits of food security. Similarly, for the rice sector, you could look at how alternate wetting and drying would allow methane abatement while also helping maintain yields for food security and reducing water use so that you have more resources available. In terms of planning processes, national arrangements, the national context, the domestic best practices, and this is critical for agriculture where a lot of the best practices really depend on what your climate is, what types of soil you have, what types of, whether it's flat land, hilly land, mountainous land, all of this can really impact the opportunities for methane abatement in your agricultural sector. And then methodological approaches in terms of how you are estimating your greenhouse gases and what assumptions you're using for those estimates. And just to highlight the importance of agricultural methane, it accounts for 42% of anthropogenic methane emissions. And you can see here the breakdown by sector. 30% from enteric fermentation of ruminants, 4% from manure management of all livestock, and 10% from rice cultivation. And as we discussed earlier, taking action on agricultural methane allows us to also work on other critical aspects of agriculture, such as food security, nutrition, and economic livelihoods of rural communities. Solutions exist today for taking action on methane. You have improving feed and animal health. You have capturing methane through biogas as a source of energy, better manure management practices such as composting. For rice sector, you have alternate wetting, drying, and also what's missing here is dry seeding rice. You also have reducing open burning and reusing crop stubble instead of burning it to reduce black carbon. And then finally, behavioral change in terms of more sustainable diets in line with the WHO and reducing food loss and waste. In terms of steps for NDC enhancement, the number one, first, you should estimate annual emissions of all gases affecting climate, PM 2.5, and ozone. Then develop baseline scenarios for all sectors contributing to these emissions over the medium and long term. Evaluate the mitigation potential of current national plans and strategies that will affect emissions, so really understanding your national context today. Identify what additional policies and measures could provide further benefits and mitigation potential. Quantify the changes of those policies in greenhouse gases, short-lived climate pollutants, and air pollutants. And then quantify the multiple benefits of implementing those, such as climate, air pollution, development, food security, nutrition. Prioritize and finalize the selection of the mitigation measures and define targets. And again, cutting methane in the agriculture sector should align with your local agroecological zones of production, really understanding how farmers are producing that food, whether it's livestock or rice, and understanding what practices are best adapted to those ecological zones. Better pasture management, improving feed, improving animal health, and genetics for increased productivity and methane abatement, all are opportunities in the livestock sector. And in the rice sector, we have this example from Vietnam, which you'll hear more from Dr. Nia in a bit. Integrated crop management, optimizing water and nutrient use. Advanced farming technologies using alternate wetting and drying for irrigation. System of rice intensification, modernized watering and fertilization practices. Also, Vietnam has worked on livestock by improving ruminant rations. They've converted inefficient rice lands to other crops, and they've used composting and biogas for animal waste management. So thank you all for your time. And with that, I'll turn it over to our next presenter. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gregory. And yes, in the interest of time and to allow a little bit of time for questions afterward, I would like to immediately turn to you, Adriano Santiago de Oliveira. Thank you so much for being with us today once again. And you are going to tell us a little bit about Brazil's experience. So over to you. I let you share your screen and tell us more about your country's experience.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Jerry, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. And I would like to extend my regards to the assistants for this morning or this afternoon or this evening, depending on where you are. I would like to share my screen in order to give the presentation. The idea here is talk about, well, first of all, I would like to consult if you are able to see the screen. Good. Thank you so much, Sophie, again. So I would like to talk a little bit on the Brazil experience and plans for methane inclusion into our NDC, in particular for the agriculture sector. And please, Sophie, Greg, control my time. If I'm going to over my time that you suggested to me, please cut me and we can continue the discussions during the Q&A. But I just like to share with you some figures about the Brazilian emissions. I think Greg showed us the importance on having the methane emissions contemplated in our national inventory. Brazil has a very good series, historical series from 1990 until 2020 regarding emissions. We are preparing our next BTR, the first BTR actually, to present and submit to the UNFCCC next December. But I would like to call for your attention to the fact that considering the total net GHG emissions in 2020, the total is 1.6 billion tons of CO2 equivalent. Considering methane, we have something like 300 million tons of methane, of CO2 equivalent, sorry. So here we are aggregating our emissions, and considering methane, we have something like 300 million tons of CO2 equivalent coming from agriculture regarding this specific gas. But I think it's important to share, I'm not going to have a discussion in terms of metrics. We know that the global methane pledge is about methane. It's a mass of methane, it's not CO2 equivalent. But I'd just like to show you that if we are using the global warm potential, the GWP 100 as metric, agriculture sector contributes to something like 29% of our total emissions in Brazil. However, if we consider the metric of GTP, the global temperature potential 100, the emissions from agriculture here in Brazil drops to half. So we are talking about 15% of our emissions. Considering NDCs, I'd just like to flag that it's a very important issue for the world, of course, but especially for Brazil. The new cycle of NDC submissions to the UNFCCC will take place during the Azerbaijan presidency of the COP. We know that countries should submit their NDCs 9 months before the COP, but this process will going to be closed in the COP in Brazil, in Belém. So it's very important having the discussions here about the new cycle of NDCs. I'd just like to call for your attention, and Greg presented the example of Japan regarding its NDC, but I'd just like to remind that Brazil is one of the fewest developing countries which have an absolute net greenhouse gas emission targets for the economy-wide. We are very close to the NDCs coming from developed countries. And in 2025, the Brazilian target is to reduce its emissions in something like 48.4% in comparison with 2005. It means achieving 1.32 gigatons of CO2 equivalent in 2025. You remember that in the previous slide I showed to you, our 2020 emissions in Brazil is something like 1.7 billion tons of CO2. So we are talking about here in 2025 achieving 1.32 billion tons of CO2 equivalent. And regarding 2030, additionally, our target is to reduce 53% of our CO2 equivalent emissions compared to 25 year. And it means to achieve an emission of 1.2 billion tons of CO2 equivalents in 2030. I would like to refer to one of Greg's slides because Greg showed us the importance of having different layers of information, the inventories, the BTR, the NDCs. And I just like to flag that Brazil don't have a specific target for methane. Our NDC is about the basket of gases under the UNFCCC. And again, I refer to the Greg presentation. He showed us the gases we have to report. But it's important to note that, again, Brazil has economy-wide absolute target, very close to the targets from developed countries. But it's important to note that our targets will be translated into policies and measures to be detailed and implemented by the Brazilian federal government. So our intention is to report these policies and measures, as Greg showed us in the previous slide, in our NDC, but also reporting the policies and measures in our BTR to be submitted in the end of this year. And of course, among the different gases that we need to contemplate in our NDC, we have methane emissions. I'd just like to flag one other important issue. Currently in Brazil, we are discussing the new NDC and the new mitigation and adaptation strategy. And the intention is to close these discussions in the end of this year. But it's very important to flag to you that we are not going to present sectoral emissions specifically in our NDC because it's economy-wide. But of course, we need to have a discussion about carbon budgets, and we are discussing the different carbon budgets regarding the different sectors. Here, I just like to show to you and share the information regarding our first low carbon agriculture plan, the ABC plan, the acronym in Portuguese for the low carbon agriculture plan. In the first phase, from 2010 until 2020, we have 6 sustainable practices, 6 technologies under our ABC plan. I'm not going in detail in each one, but I'd just like to call for your attention that we have a very specific technology regarding methane emissions, which is the waste treatment animals. And just like to share with you, the target for this period was 35.5 million hectares. But in the end of the period, we achieved 50.2 million hectares with this technology. So we overachieved the targets, which means a mitigation of 200 million tons of CO2 equivalents compared to the initial targets of 133 and 163 million megagrams or million tons of CO2 equivalent. We are now currently in the new phase of ABC plan. So please note that the target in terms of mitigation is 5 times compared to the previous targets. There we have something like 200 million tons of CO2 equivalents. But between 2020 and 2030, the new target is to achieve a reduction of 1 billion tons of CO2 equivalent. So it's 5 times compared to the first phase of ABC. And here we have the different technologies, different sustainable practices. So Greg talked about solutions in his presentation. Here we are talking about some solutions that Brazil is presented. Again, for considering time constraints, I'm not going in details to each of these technology, but we have 8 technologies on the ABC plan. But I just like to flag that we have again very ambitious targets regarding manure treatment, and we are talking about directly about methane. And we also have a new technology, a new sustainable practice, which is sustainable intensive fattening that dialogues directly with methane reduction emissions. This is a very new one, and we are presenting this as a solution among our policies and measures to reduce emissions in Brazil. Just to finish, I will like to give you the opportunity to have the links to our ABC platform. We are trying to monitor the different technologies, and we launched in the last COP in Dubai a model. It's a very basic model, but we are evolving on this. But we have the model regarding the recovery of degraded pastures. We have some publications about Brazilian strategy agriculture for adaptation, and you have also all the detailed information about the first phase of ABC plan in the left here in the screen. We have the link to you go in more details about our experience. I just like to finish my presentation here. Thank you very much, the CCAC support. We have 2 projects approved for this year until 2026 to implement. We have one here under the responsibility of Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock about reducing methane emissions intensity from the livestock sector. And I just like to note also that we have here with me my colleague George Caetano and my colleague Luis Rangel from the team. I know that me and myself and George, we are from Rio, so I would like to thank you very much, CCAC, for putting the Rio de Janeiro picture here about our Brazilian projects. And we have also the second project approved in the CCAC regarding the development of a methane mitigation strategy for urban and agriculture waste sectors. The part of urban waste is under the responsibility of the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, and of course, the part of agricultural waste sector under the responsibility of the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock. And again, thank you very much for the Rio, my city, in the pictures in the CCAC project. I stop here. I'm sorry if I'm going over time that about the time that we generally is presented to me, but thank you again, and I'm here able to continue the Q&A discussions. Thank you. Sorry again for if I'm going to over time, Sophie.
No, it was perfect. Thank you so much, Adriano, and thank you for telling us about the impressive work that your country has done in the agriculture sector and about the ambition for the next step. So most useful to all of us, I'm sure. And I will make sure to pass on the thank you to the team that did upload this picture on the project, that's for sure. Given the time, I would like to directly turn to Dr. Nia from IPSA, who is going to present to us about Vietnam's experience. Dr. Nia, are you with us? Are you able to share your screen and to turn on your camera?
Thank you, Sophia. And good afternoon, good evening. I don't know if my time is the evening. All of you, and very great to see you all and to share a little bit about Vietnam. So let me, I see, where can I, okay. Okay, can you see my presentation?
yes, very much so. That's working well. Thank you so much.
I will share with you a bit about the Vietnam experience in including the methane mitigation strategy in our NDC. So you know that Vietnam is not a big country, the small. We have about only 300 plus square kilometers, 1,000 square kilometers. But agriculture is play very important roles in economy of Vietnam. Last year we have the export turnover of 53 billion US dollar, and we have the feeding more than 100 million people. But also agriculture contribute quite significant for to the greenhouse gas emission. And Vietnam also one of our commitment to the NDC to reducing greenhouse gas emission. We have submitted our update NDC in 2022, and you can see from my screen presenting the comparison between the what we presented to UNFCCC in 2020 and 2022. We raised quite high our ambitions of reducing greenhouse gas emission in general and methane in particular. I will go to later why we talk about the methane in here. You can see we increase from 9% compared to business as usual in 2020 to the 15.8% with the unconditional contribution. With the conditional contribution, we even higher from the, you can see from 27% to 43.5% equivalent in agriculture. Agriculture here, including crop production and livestock production. We also have LULUCF also included in my ministry. And so in order to incorporate the methane emission in our NDC, so we see the different sources. So you can see from the screen that is we have the different sources, mainly methane coming from the agriculture sectors, specifically from the rice cultivation. You can see about big one coming from the rice cultivation, about 75%, and only maybe 1/3 is coming from the livestock, like etheric fermentation, manure management, and quite a little bit about the fuel burning of the agricultural residuals. So from these sources of the methane emission, we will form the different mitigation methods. So we're looking at the different sectors. For instance, in LULUCF, what we gonna do for the forest fire control, stop the savanna burning. For the crop production, especially in rice cultivation, we apply the lot of series of different technology practices, especially for the water management. You can see like AWD, SRI, on-mass fire reduction, on-mass like using the certified seed, and then we're reducing fertilizer using water, using the food loss, and mid-season drainage, combining between rice and shrimp and fish, shore management for rice sector. And then we have the either residual treatment for the either crop, like a stop savanna burning, circular economy, and using the residuals, recycling the residuals of the either crops. For livestock sector, of course, we will focusing on the managing the enteric fermentation by the feed mix, like combining with a different high quality feed and adding bioenzymes or the absorption of enzyme into the feed of the livestock. Besides, we also apply different measures for the manure management, like a biogas digester, composting, organic fertilizer production. So this form the NDC because in order to decide and select the different methods, we are based on 3 main criteria. The first one is aligned with the national industry policy. And then we have also potential to reduce greenhouse gas emission, and in this case, methane in particular, and also co-benefit. With agriculture sector, we add another two more criteria. So one is about the economically and technically feasible, and also scalable, and very important for agriculture sector is we call the measurable, means the measure need to be able to measure the reduction, reporting and verification of the reduction. From those basics, we are forming the unconditional contribution and conditional. We're unconditional, we are highly focusing on the method providing highly economic efficiency, low costs, or the helps experience in implementing domestically achieved with a good result already. Advantages are widely developed in Vietnam deployed. For the conditional one, we want to have the inline with the support and priorities of the developed country, international organization, and we also receive quite support from CCAC. So we already have implementing the inventory and supporting for dialogue on the policy and management of the waste in the livestock sector. Or recently, we also received the support for developing the guidelines of the inventory in agriculture sector, including crop production, livestock, and LULUCF also. So from that, you can see we have, with the national level, we have our national action plan to reduce the methane emission, because we are member of joining the global methane pledge to cut the 30% compared to the 2020. So we have the national one, but within the agriculture sector, we combine, because about 62% of total emission from agriculture sector are methane, especially in the agriculture, so-called including crop production and livestock. This is why we combine this in the action plan. We call in the agriculture sector, we call the action plan to reducing greenhouse gas emission, including the methane. So we have the very specific target for both the total emission and also methane. You can see from my my presentation here, like in the 2030, we the total emission of methane emission does not exceed more than 30.7 metric tons in crop production and 15.2 metric ton of in livestock production. It's equivalent to at least reduce about 30%. The same, we have the target until the 2050. And from thus, we form the different very specific activity. You can see the first group is about water management and application of improved farming technique in dry cultivation to reduce the methane. You see the apply the AWD and either management technology like SRI, one reduction, tree reduction tree gain, and mid-season drainage or medium for medium irrigation infrastructure. And then we have the also poor for the irrigation infrastructure. We apply organic rice farming, combining with the AWD, etc. And then we also have the second group of that is converting or replacing nitrogen fertilizer with low release fertilizer and control release fertilizers with a complex fertilizer, or increasing the use of composts to reduce both CO2 emission and nitrogen oxide emission. And the third group in rye cultivation, you're converting rye cultivation for more effective use of the rye land, like changing from 2 to 3 rice crop a year into the aquaculture, like a rice fish, rice shrimp, so that can increase the income and livelihood of the farmer, benefit to the farmer. At the same time, we reduce the greenhouse gas emission from the rye cultivation. Or the changing the inefficient rye crop to the high value, more efficient crop like vegetable or the fruit crop. And then we also have the measure in livestock sectors, like I already mentioned, improve the feed ration for dairy cows, like improving the quality of diet for the beef and cattle, improving the quality of rational cattle. For either ruminants, improve technology to use livestock wastes as organic fertilizer, and developing organic farming models to reduce greenhouse gas emission. And then for the manure management, we have the different like composting from pig or swamp production at the two different levels, like a farm level, small household level, or the soiling with the liquid and solid waste. Separation for the pig manure so that we can be able to separate the solid one for the composting and liquid one for the biogas. So we also using the effectively explore the available biogas. We have now installed total already about 500,000 different biogas digester in different scales. So this is all of the experience from Vietnam, and also I want to let you know that Vietnam government just recently approved a new program we call the 1 million hectare of rice, high quality and low carbons. That is the main mostly from the reducing methane in Mekong River Delta. So we can have the targeted of reducing the methane equivalent to, I think, around 9 to 10 million ton of CO2 equivalent from the methane emission in rice cultivation in Mekong River Delta. Thank you. Back to you, Sophia.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to, in the interest of time, I'm going to take over from Sophie here instead of having her hand over to me. That was a fantastic question set of presentations. I think incredibly informative. I'm sure there are a great number of questions. Unfortunately, we only have 6 minutes left scheduled here. So I think we could probably only take maybe 2 or 3 questions. Please use the hand raising function if you're interested in asking a question. As we're moving towards that, I want to just take the moment to say that our next MRAP workshop is focused on the oil and gas sector, and it is in exactly 2 weeks. It's the 30th of May, as you can see on the screen here, right here, and we very much hope that you will join us for that one. We will be having these workshops every 2 weeks, so 2 weeks after that, we will be hosting an MRV workshop in the natural gas sector, and then the following 2 weeks after that, we will be holding our concluding workshop on waste sector methane mitigation in the NDCs. So I see that we have 4 hands raised. Let's see if we can get to all of them. Hopefully, please keep your questions short and direct them to a specific person if you are or presenter. So I don't know if we can allow these 5 hands now to unlock their microphones. But let's start with the first one. Tobe Chukuk Wu. I apologize. That was for mangling your name. But if you can turn on your microphone, please do ask your question. Here we go.
Please, for this opportunity. My name is Tobechku. I'm the project manager in Field Gap Africa Development Initiative. And I submitted a concept note for the call for project. But my question is going to Naga that sells a combination of alternate wet and drying season with fish farming. How comes that can within the period of farming, the last presenter, that's the person I'm asking the question, within the period of farming, how possible that can reduce methane production because if you combine fishing with upland or paddy rice, longer time for fish maturity? That is my first question. Isn't that going to increase methane production, metagenesis in the process? Then the second question is I think in Nigeria, we haven't had any concrete policy in methane mitigation in rice production, neither on ruminant animals. What we have here is gas flaring. So I don't know if there is any support from the CCAC to push up a policy transformations or advocacies on rice mitigation strategies. Then the last question, sorry to cut it short, is there any kind of strategy that goes with short-lived rice for some rural farmers? Because I think here in Nigeria we are scattered farm holders, I know, and open graze heads. That is what we are practicing here in Nigeria. So is there any mitigation strategy for something like that for us here? Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the workshop.
Thank you very much. I'll quickly answer the second question. Yes, we do provide project finance and support for rice systems and methane mitigation in that space. So we'd be happy to discuss that with you offline. Your first question, I believe, was to Vietnam about the combination of fish farming with rice mitigation practices, and then I think maybe Greg can jump in on that last one. But please keep the answers short.
For Vietnam, I think it's the alternative. We have in the rice fields, so we have rail fish. Of course, we have the different time to dryness. So we have the digging the very shallow canals around the rice fields, so that we can keep the fish during the dry outs for the applying an alternative one. Because if you, in order to raise the fish, you have to reducing all the kinds of chemicals and even the fertilizers for the rice, mostly using the compost. This way we can be able to get both reducing the greenhouse gas emission and increase the different income for the farm. Back to you.
Thank you. Greg?
What was the third question again?
Specific practices for mitigation of rice in Nigeria.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so some specific mitigation opportunities would be alternate wetting and drying, where there's rice production in large delta type regions where there's a lot of water, where there is less irrigation and less kind of need for continual flooding of the fields. You can do direct seeding of rice where the rice is grown in drier conditions, and so you don't run into as many issues with the methanogenesis in the flooded fields. And then as we discussed earlier, the rice and fish combination has actually been shown in initial studies to reduce methane emissions. There's still more research needed on that, why exactly that is, but from initial studies, it seems that mixing rice and fish does reduce methane emissions, perhaps because the fish are eating more of the organic material, or perhaps because it changes the oxygen dynamics in the water, but more research is needed on that.
Thank you very much, Greg. So we are a minute over, but let's take one more question, and then what I would like to ask, if there are additional questions, you can please send them to us and we can forward them on to the correct person to get them answered for you. And if we can share the last slide of the slide deck, our contact information is there that you can use. But let's go to Craig, and apologies for the other three. We're not going to be able to get to you during this session.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thanks. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. The question is regarding the rice in Vietnam. What are the policy mechanisms, or how are you incentivizing reducing emissions from rice, specifically with the straw management? There's a lot of costs involved in collecting straw and moving it around. So interested to know how that's being encouraged.
Good question. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a bit, as I mentioned, the one of the selection of a different method for rice cultivation is about selecting the method that is the lowest costs and bring the core benefit. For instance, the AWD and things like that is mostly at least reducing the cost of inputs, so that we can encourage the farmer to apply, because the farmer, when looking at the economic benefit first before they looking at the mitigation benefits. For the store, we also try to find, but this is, you are right, difficult, because we already encourage them to convert it using the straw either to feed the cattle, or running to feed the cattle, or the raising the mushroom, so that they can have the additional income. Of course, they will need to calculate whether that is profitable to do it or not. But this way we can be able to encourage them, and we can providing certain like extension support for the small farmer to apply the certain model, or demonstrating the model, so that farmer can learn that it's beneficially feasible, economically feasible to apply this model. Back to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the answers. I'm very sorry to those of you with lingering questions, but I do encourage you to reach out to us. We have our email addresses here on the screen, and we can direct your questions to the appropriate authorities, and hopefully we can keep engaged on this and have a back and forth. As I mentioned, in 2 weeks, we will have our next workshop focused on the oil and gas sector. And as Sophie mentioned, we will be putting out our guidance on NDC enhancement for all of these sectors, and in fact, for all short-lived climate pollutants within this month. So keep your eyes open for that, and we will keep you informed as that proceeds. Thank you all for joining us, no matter where you are in the world, whether it's early morning or very late at night. I myself just came in from Tokyo last night, so my body is in, I think it's 11 p.m. for me right now. But I'm always energized by this community, so I'm wide awake and happy to be here. I want to thank our speakers, our experts from the countries, and Greg as well, our agricultural expert. He is a great resource within the Secretariat, and will also be able to help answer all of your questions as you send them in. And then my colleagues within the MRAP community, Sophie, Bernard, Jarir, and Scarlett. Enjoy the rest of your days, and we will hopefully see you again in 2 weeks. Bye all.